Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, back for my Week 2 LCK weekly analysis and review. You guys definitely gave your feedback on the new layout in the comment section last week on the Week 1 review, and you guys seem to really enjoy it, so we're going to go ahead and stick with that. That's going to be running it back this week, so hope you guys enjoy that. Without further ado, I don't want to waste too much time. This was an incredibly interesting week of LCK action, quite a few upsets, including what is undoubtedly the upset of the year, so stick around for that. But let's go ahead and jump right into our day one games, our first series of the week, and that is going to be SANDBOX versus Afreeca Freecs. This was a pretty interesting series. I think this just showcased a lot of what I was talking about last week. This was a 2-0 win for SANDBOX. Both games being pretty in control most of the game. Fate is going to be my player of the series here. He was very good in the series. He's actually been sneakily very good this entire year so far. SANDBOX hasn't necessarily all performed, but Fate has been kind of the shining light of this team so far. Leo is in for Route. I am a fan of Route. However, Leo came in here and this team looked so much better as soon as he subbed in. So big props here to Leo. This is probably the direction you end up going. They just looked like a more cohesive unit around him than they did around Route. So I would continue going in this direction. SANDBOX looked way better in the series than they did at any point in Week 1. This was definitely kind of a whole team effort here. Summit did not have a good Week 1. He definitely had a good series here. And then obviously the bot lane stepped it up. Effort also did not have a very good Week 1. And he was much better in this series. But Fate, especially on that Orianna, was super strong in both games. My dud of the series is going to be Dread. It could have gone to quite a few people in this series. However, it's going to go to Dread for me, not just because of the scoreline, but also really just because, I don't want to put too much of the macro decision here on the jungler. But Afreeca has the worst macro of any major team that I've seen in quite a while. They just do not know what to do for a lot of the game. They give up objectives basically for free. They don't make rotations. This team really needs to figure out what they are doing, because what they are doing right now is not good. It's not working, at least. They had a series win over, I think their only win was over Fredit BRION, and, it's just, it's tough. It's tough to really say that this team has a lot of upside if they can't really figure out what to do, especially because they're able to generate leads in the early game. We saw that in the series against DRX. Not as much in this series, but we saw that especially in the series against DRX. And they just throw it away. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to play from behind. They don't really know how to do anything right now. They have the talent. Keen, Fly, Bang are all top-tier players. I think Dread and Lehens have been very underwhelming to start the year. Lehens especially, I thought was really bad in Week 1. And then Dread, we'll get to, he was really bad in Week 2. So, there's a couple things, a couple kinks to work out. But, Afreeca has the talent to turn around. They just really need the direction. As for where these teams both stand, obviously both of them trying to make that final playoff spot. I don't currently see either of these teams making playoffs. I don't think either of them really have the talent to do it. But, SANDBOX showed some good things this week, so maybe I could be wrong. Maybe they could completely turn it around and slip into that playoff spot. One small thing I forgot to say to add on to the end of that before we move on to the next series is that Dread is going to be my dud of the week as well. The dud of the week, obviously, throughout the entire LCK, I thought he was the worst performing member on the team that performed the worst in the LCK this week. So Dread is going to be my dud of the week. However, that doesn't mean he's a bad player. It just means he really didn't have a quality week, and hopefully he can turn it around. That's going to go ahead and take us to our second series of day one of Week 2 of the LCK, and that is going to be DRX taking on Nongshim RedForce here in what was a very exciting series to watch, which I think is going to become DRX's kind of calling card here. Pretty much every series they've been a part of has been incredibly close this year. DRX is going to take the 2-1 victory here. Another really solid win for a team that is really impressing this year so far. But Nongshim actually did take Game 1 in a game that DRX had a pretty sizable lead in. And they threw that, which was a little tough to see, but it's okay. They make up for it later. Game 2 was also pretty close until about 20 minutes, in which DRX kind of pulled out. And then game 3 was kind of the antithesis of game 1. Nongshim had a very, very large lead pretty late into the game, about 25, 26 minutes. DRX coming back and taking the series victory almost exactly like they did against Afreeca in their first series of the year. This is just a team that is going to be very exciting to watch. My player of the series is going to be Bao, who I thought really stepped up. This bot lane, it's definitely their best series of the year so far. Both Bao and Becca, I thought, played very well here. And they're going to play very well later in the week as well. We'll get to that later, but just a very, very solid performance here from DRX, a team that just refuses to die, which is very, very cool because obviously this team is so young. You have Solka, Bao, and Becca all coming in as people who have not really played before. King and obviously over in the LPL and Pioshik went to Worlds last year with this DRX team before they blew up the roster, but overall, this is a very inexperienced team. To see them be able to battle back from deficits like they pretty much have all season so far has been very, very impressive. On the side of Nongshim, I don't think this was that bad of a series. I think you really have to hang on to that lead in Game 3. My dud of the series is going to be Rich, who has had a very rough start to the season. I was very, I was excited for this Nongshim team, mostly because, you're keeping the two players that I really liked from Dynamics in Rich and Dectum. You're bringing in Peanut, who had a fantastic 2020. And then you're bringing in Kellen as well, who I've always been a fan of. Bay obviously was a question mark, but I thought this team had a lot of talent. It's really just not come together. These solo lanes are very weak. This might be the weakest solo lane duo, maybe outside of Brion in the LCK, in Rich and Bay. They just don't have it. Rich, especially this year, has taken a major step back from what we saw last year. He showed pretty consistent improvement throughout 2020. It has not shown up so far this year. I will say Peanut, Dectum, and Kellen are playing well. Peanut and Dectum especially, I think, are actually playing really, really well so far. And it's not really too much of a negative on Nongshim here. I think they can turn it around, and I think there's a chance they can be a playoff team. However, they just don't. They're not able to put it together right now. They just seem like a non-cohesive unit with some players that are really, really dragging down the overall quality of the team. One thing to note, point out, whatever you want to say, this is the first time I get to talk about it in the LCK review. I talked about it in the LPL one as well, but Pioshik did bust out the Udyr in this series, and he's going to do it later in the week as well. But Udyr as a pick is just so funny to me. I hate Udyr as a champion. Like, not because it's like, oh, I get destroyed by him in solo queue, but just like, I can't play him. Like, he loses to CC. So it's really interesting to see him get played, because I never thought he would get played here at the highest level. But here we are. I mean, he's getting played pretty much all over the world. So really, really interesting to see Udyr getting picked here. I really like the Sylas in the top lane. Kingan's champion pool, I think, is going to be really dynamic this year. I'm not the biggest fan of Kingan in the world. However, I thought he was really, really good this week, mostly because they finally let him be on champions that I think he's more comfortable with. The Sylas, the Aurelia, those more aggressive-oriented top laners. I think he's going to do really well on that, and I expect to see him on those in the future as well. But overall, DRX looks like a very, very solid team, one that is going to sneakily climb up in the standings. I think they're, going to surprise a lot of people. I think if they do make playoffs, they're going to be a tough out. Nongshim, I think, is also kind of on that bubble of a playoff spot. I'm not quite sure if they're there right now, but I do think they're close. And speaking of teams who just can't hang on to leads, that's going to transition us into our third series, our first series of day 2 here, and that's going to be T1 taking on Gen G in what was my match series. T1 takes a very close game 1, as they have done the entire year. We're going to get into their series later, but I'm pretty sure they've won every single game 1 so far this year. Faker is in, by the way, for closer. I know they're flip-flopping, but Faker is in this series. Gen G takes a very comfortable game 2. It wasn't really ever that close. And then game 3, T1 had a pretty massive lead at around 20 minutes, and they just could not hang on. Gen G doing a fantastic job to come back, mostly on the back of some fantastic engages by this bot lane. But we'll go ahead and get to that now, I guess. My player of the series is going to be Liiv on Gen G, pulling out the Jarvan support here in a very, very interesting thing. I have not seen this in solo queue. I have not seen this anywhere else in pro. This is kind of the first time I've really been privy to seeing this myself. I don't know, maybe it's popular in Korean solo queue, but it's the first time I've seen it, and it really, really worked in this series. It kind of turned around the entire series. That Kalista Jarvan bot lane was incredibly strong. Liiv played it pretty much expertly as well. He's clearly had experience on the pick, so I I don't know, just a really, really cool thing to see him bust that out here. I like it a lot, honestly, and I'm kind of one of those guys that's usually pretty anti like non-meta stuff. But when it can be bust out like this, and it's clearly something that works against the meta, like it's a great counter into something like an Alistar or a Thresh or an Aphelios, especially because you just get on him so quickly. I really like that kind of adaptation, and I thought it was really, really cool to see that come out here. As for the rest of the sides, I think both teams played kind of well. T1 has really good laning phase, and then they just don't really know what to do with it after. LM is going to be my dud of the series, which sucks because I've been hyping him up all year long. I actually thought he had a pretty good week as well in the series later this week, but this was not a good series for him here. 3 games on the Pantheon, 3 games without really too much of an impact. He had a really good start in game 3, but he couldn't turn it into anything, and basically was just out-jungled by Clid the entire series. So just kind of a tough series here for T1. I'm not going to say that this team looks better with Closer in, because Faker is a good player, but the series that Faker has been, Faker hasn't really been a game changer yet. He hasn't looked bad, but we're kind of waiting for him to become that, game changer that he's always been for T1, and he has not yet been that this year. He played the Zoe and the Azir in the series. The Zoe pick was much better for him. The Azir did not work. Like I said last week, if you watched my week 1 review, I'm not a fan of the Azir pick. I think it's just much too slow in this meta where you can pick, Camille or Renekton and then Olaf and Nidalee and just make plays all over the map. I don't think you're going to be scaling up for team fights. Especially with split push comps and 1-3-1s being quite popular now in top lane, and just it's a tough thing to do. So not a fan of the Azir pick. Seems like Faker disagrees with me, but that's all right. As for the outlooks of these teams, Gen.G is rolling. They are fantastic right now and looking incredibly strong. You can't take that away from them. I want to give a shout out to Rascal here. Rascal is going to be one of the 3 players that I'm going to say right now is top 3 in MVP voting. For me, at least. We'll get into the others later, but I think Rascal's had an incredible start to the year. He's done very, very well. He's been the best top laner in Korea so far. But as for T1, they really got to get back on track soon because they are not on track right now. The teams that they have lost to have been very good teams. Of course, their losses are to Damwon and to Gen.G, which are arguably the 2 best teams in Korea right now. But, they have to figure out a few problems before I really feel super comfortable with keeping them on that same level as those 2 teams. That's going to take us to the one I have been dying to talk about all week long. If you follow me on Twitter, you know this is one of the few times that I actually tweeted, but that's going to be Damwon Gaming KIA taking on Fredit BRION in a 2-0 win for Fredit BRION. This is my projected 10th place team beating and pretty consistently beating my projected first place team, the team that I had considered the best team in the entire world. So very, very interesting here. I don't even really know how to talk about this series, because BRION played really well, and Damwon didn't. especially. Umti's going to be my player of the series. He looked very good. I know I was talking a lot last week about putting Chieftain in for because I thought Chieftain had more upside. Clearly, they saw something in that I didn't, and it definitely showed in the series. He straight up out-jungled Canyon. Both games on the Graves, he basically took over. I don't even really know what to say. I'm really at a loss because there's not much analysis I can give for this, because this feels like such an outlier of a 2 games, right? This is clearly not the Damwon team that, is at their best, and this is clearly not the BRION team that is at their best. You know what I mean? I don't like, this is a once in a million, kind of outcome here, at least in my opinion. And that's why I'm mostly not taking this account too much, especially the drafts were very, very odd. Damwon banning Thresh both games, first banning Thresh and then picking Aphelios is very odd. I'm not really sure. I guess you're trying to dissuade BRION from picking the Aphelios early, but playing Aphelios with Galio is significantly less, impactful than with the Thresh. And then you get greedy and you're down 0-1 and you pick the Kayle in game 2, which just isn't a good pick. I don't think Kayle works. Same reason Azir doesn't work right now. Copy and paste everything I said for Azir. I don't think Kayle works right now. I think it's fine into some matchups, and he did get it into the Ornn, which is one of the matchups that I don't hate, like, a lot. But, like, you know, with Camille and Renekton being so prevalent in the top lane, I'm just shocked to see a pick like Kayle come out at all in 2021. Showmaker is my dud of the series. He just got outlaned by Lava, which is super weird. I mean, yeah, I never thought I was going to say that, you know, before this, but Lava just played better. Showmaker on picks that we know he can play on as well with Twisted Fate and the Syndra, so just a very weird series. I'm not going to read too much into this because I think it's just Damwon not taking their opponent seriously and Brion kind of being ready for that. So yeah, I mean, massive upset here, but I'm not really sure this tells us how good these two teams actually are. Moving on to day 3 of the LCK week 2 here, and we're going to start that off with KT Rolster taking on Hanwha Life Esports in what was a very fun series, actually another very back and forth series. There's been a lot of them this week. It's actually been really, really fun. The LCK was a blast this week. Hanwha is going to take the 2-1 win, which was expected, but I think KT actually looks a lot better than maybe I gave them credit for. We're going to talk about Hanwha first, but we'll get to KT. My player of the series is going to be Deft. He was fantastic on the Kai'Sa this week. That's definitely his best pick, and that's something I would try to get him on every game. If I'm going up against Hanwha, I am pretty much 100% banning out that Kai'Sa because it is clearly something that he is super proficient on. It's an incredibly strong champion, probably the best AD in the meta right now, and it's also his best champion. You can't really keep him on it. He's just too good there. Outside of that, I thought the entire team actually played really well. One guy I really want to point out is Arthur, who, you know, his stat line's not going to show it too much, but he's actually quietly been very, very good for this Hanwha Life team. He's also very good in a series later this week, and we'll get to that, but, you know, I'm just a big fan of what Arthur's actually been able to do. I was really, really shocked when they announced that he was going to be the starting jungler here, obviously coming in from Direwolves in the OPL. But he is really proven that he's, you know, a pretty decent LCK jungler, if not a top half one, which is definitely not what I expected at the beginning of the year. As for KT, I thought they looked fine in this series. This was just a tough series against a tough team. And for them to hang tough in this, I think is really impressive. My dud of the series is going to be UCal, mostly for that Yone game in Game 3, which just wasn't super good. He wasn't very proficient on the Orianna in Game 1 as well. The Game 2 was very good for him, but just not what you want to see out of UCal. Really kind of what we've come to expect from him, which is inconsistency. Some games he's going to be very good. Some games he's going to be very bad. It's just kind of what you get with UCal. You did switch out Blank and Bonnie in this series. You brought Bonnie in for Game 3 here. Blank is clearly the better jungler here. I would run with him for the rest of the year. I think we've seen enough this year from Bonnie to know that Blank is better, at least in my opinion. And I think that was shown in this series as well. His Olaf game and even his Talia game in Game 1, I thought was better than Bonnie's Lilia game in Game 3. So I would stick with that. Another guy who's pleasantly surprising to me this year has been Zeus. He didn't have the best of weeks this week, but it is important to talk about. I think they did find a good support there, you know, kind of a diamond in the rough there in Zeus for KT Rolster. As for where these teams look, I think both of these teams are definitely looking for playoffs. Hanwha especially actually looking probably for a championship. This team is very, very competitive. We'll get to them a little bit later this week, but they are a very competitive team with two of the best players in the entire world in Chovy and Deft. So it's going to be hard to keep them away from the top. As for KT Rolster, I think this is probably a playoff team, which is exceeding the expectations that I had in the preseason. They are definitely outdoing what I expected. I think this bot lane has been a lot better than I thought, and I think UCal and Blank have worked together a little better than I thought. And so I like what I see out of KT Rolster. They're going to be fighting for that final spot with like DRX and Nongshim and SANDBOX and all those other teams, maybe Afreeca if they can turn it around. So it's going to be a tough race for those final few playoff spots, but I do think they have the talent to pull it off. Speaking of teams that are fighting for that last playoff spot, we're going to jump into our second series of Day 3, and that's going to be DRX taking on Liiv SANDBOX in another fun series for DRX. It's just what we get now at this point. This is almost identical to the Afreeca series in Game 1. DRX does take the 2-1 victory. They were a lot more dominant in Game 1. They looked very, very good in Game 1. They got obliterated. They got absolutely trounced in Game 2. SANDBOX looked fantastic in that Game 2. Probably, I think it's the shortest game of any major region so far this year. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do keep track of all these numbers, so I guess, I should probably know this, but I'm pretty sure it's the shortest game of any major region game so far this year. And then game 3 was really, really back and forth. A very, very solid win here for DRX. Becca is going to actually be my player of the series. I thought he was very, very, very good. He looked super good on that Galio especially. Really like that pick for him, and I think it really works. I don't know. He has kind of been up and down so far at the beginning of this year. He had a really rough week 1, even when they were looking good. This bot lane kind of did. But it really seems like they're settling in now, getting a little bit more comfortable. They are learning how to play in late game team fights, and they're actually doing it really, really, really well. So big props there to this bot lane. My dud of the series is going to go to Leo, which is a little unfortunate. I don't think he really played that poorly. I think this team just really wasn't going to be able to support him here. I will say the bot lane did get outclassed. Bao and Becca were clearly better this series than Leo and Effort. And for, you could take, that for what it's worth, I guess. But, I thought Fate, we'll point out Fate had another pretty solid series here. So did Krako. Krako's pretty inconsistent, but when he has his highs, they're pretty high. So, good for him. But I definitely think that's what you're looking to build around here as Sandbox, is that mid-jungle duo. Summit has not been the Summit that we know this year so far. You really have to expect that he's going to be able to turn it around at some point, but he has not been able to keep up with pretty much any top laners so far that they have played this year. Kingen is nowhere near the top of the top laner list, at least in my opinion, and Summit really had no chance of keeping up with him. Again, you put Kingen on those Silas Aurelia picks, though, the stuff that he's a lot more comfortable with, and he looks pretty good. So, as for outlooks, DRX really, really, really solid. I think this is a team that's going to kind of be, like I said earlier, I think they're just going to be a tough out every game. I think they're going to make playoffs purely on the back of, I don't think they're going to drop series to bad teams because they know how to play from behind, even if they get behind in the early game. They're really, really good macro-wise, and I think that's going to help a lot with some of the inexperience that they may have, or the mechanical shortcomings that some of them may have as well. As for Sandbox, it's going to be tough for them to make playoffs here if they keep losing to teams like DRX. DRX and KT Rolster and Afreeca and Nongshim, those are the teams you have to beat if you really want to make playoffs, and Sandbox really hasn't been able to consistently beat any of them, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with them. We know they have the talent, but it's not coming together for them this year so far. Moving on to day 4 here, we are going to jump into our first series, which is Afreeca Freecs taking on Damwon Gaming Kia here. Welcome back, Damwon. This is a lot better here. This is a lot more of what we expected here. A 2-0 series victory against Afreeca, a bottom tier team, I guess we can say at this point. Damwon is a very, very good team, and they proved that here. They still have their shortcomings. They definitely still have their shortcomings, but I definitely think they looked a lot better here, a lot more aggressive, which I think is really what you want to see with Damwon. If they're coming out and being passive, I don't think that's what you want to see with a roster this talented. They were a lot more aggressive this series, and I think it really worked out for them. Showmaker is going to be my player of the series, especially on that Syndra in game 1. It was very, very solid. He had a pretty bad series against Brion. I think he just wasn't really... I'm going to be honest, I just don't think he cared too much because Brion is, not really an opponent to care about. But, this was definitely a little bit of a revenge series for him. The Syndra game in game 1 obliterated Fly. Fly is going to be my dud of the series here, who he had a tough time. He had a really tough time dealing with Showmaker. Fly has actually been one of the bright spots, probably the brightest spot for Afreeca at the beginning of the year so far for me. And, he kind of got, it's a tough matchup. Obviously, Showmaker's one of the best players in the entire world, but he did kind of get trounced by Showmaker both games here on the Orianna and then on the Syndra against the Lucian. So a tough loss there for Afreeca, but it's exactly what we needed to see after out of Damwon after losing to Brion. Both games were pretty decisive fashion. Game 1 it took a little bit of time to close out, but game 2 was pretty decisive. Just a solid win here for Damwon. Like I was saying earlier, Damwon is one of the best teams in the world. I don't think that loss to Brion really changes that opinion for me too much. However, it is good to see them come out after adversity like that and bounce back. As for Afreeca, they really just aren't going to be able to compete against the top teams in this league. Damwon, Genji, Hanwha, they're not going to be able to be on that level. So unfortunate for them, but only so sad you could possibly be here. This team's macro is awful, like I said, so it is what it is. But unfortunately, I don't think they're going to be a playoff team this year. Moving on to our second series of day 4, and that's going to be Fredit BRION taking on Nongshim RedForce in a 2-0 win for Nongshim here. Just like I said, oh wow, here's the real DK. Here's the real Fredit BRION. Getting pretty handily beat here by Nongshim. They had a tough time closing it out in game 1, but they were ahead the entire game. Like they never didn't have control, and then game 2 was kind of a slaughter. So Nongshim looking very, very good here. My player of the series is going to be Dektum. Dektum was one of my most hyped players going into 2021, one of the players that I was most excited about, and he really showed up in this series. He got the Kaisa both games. It's definitely a pick I want to see them go to. I feel like I say that for every team, but like everybody's good at Kaisa apparently. I thought the big thing that I think to take away here for Nongshim was that your pieces that you're maybe not as comfortable about played really, really well. Rich and Bay especially I thought played very well. Rich in the top lane was fantastic. That's going to kind of lead into my Hoya being the dud of the series here. Hoya had a very good series against DK earlier in the week, but he did not look good against Nongshim here. He just got kind of trampled both games, especially on that Aatrox. That Aatrox did not work, which is weird because I think Aatrox is actually a sneakily very strong pick here. I don't think it's that bad in Gragas. I just think he got absolutely obliterated in that lane. Took a pretty big step back this week as well on, the Olaf and the Pantheon. You'd hope that he'd be able to take over. He is not. I love Peanut. I think he's fantastic. I think he's incredibly underrated right now. I think he's easily one of the top 3 junglers in the region right now. And I don't think he's necessarily going to get that kind of exposure, mostly because Nongshim's not like one of the top teams. Peanut is fantastic. Let's not take that away from him. I love that he's pulling out the Kindred. The Marksman jungle, I think, is always fun to see. He pulls out the Graves, the Kindred. He's always been a fantastic Kindred player, so it's really good to see him pull that out there. Him and Pioshik, I think, are the most fun Kindreds to watch, maybe in the world. And then as for Kellen and Dektum, I think they're starting to develop that synergy, and I think it's really, really starting to work out. They dominated this game. As for BRION, there's really not much I can say. This is more of the BRION that we expected. Every lane lost, pretty much both games, so it's just really hard to tell like where to go from here. I don't think Lava played unbelievably terribly, but Bay is obviously the weak point of Nongshim, so that's not exactly the best takeaway to have. Not really a good showing at all from BRION. Not exactly what you wanted to see after a really strong series win against Damwon, but, a lot more down to earth, I think, as to what we expected from this team. Jumping into our final day of LCK action here this week, we are going to start off with our first Telecom Wars rivalry of the season, and that's going to be KT Rolster taking on T1 in a 2-1, maybe surprise victory here for KT. A very, very strong victory here. A very close series, but again, another series where T1 kind of throws an early lead that they have. My player of the series is going to go ahead and be Hybrid here for KT. I thought he played really well in those team fights on the Samira. This is a pick that can just take over if she gets ahead, and Hybrid absolutely did that in games 2 and 3. Game 3 especially, Hybrid was an absolute menace. Really, really tough to deal with. Blank is back in here full-time for KT Rolster. That is absolutely the right decision. He looked very, very good in this series. That Nidalee pick in Game 3 especially was definitely something that I want to see more out of from him. Yukal looked good. Doran, I do think, is going to end up being the weak point of this roster. However, he held his own against Kana. Kana had a pretty decent series, but Doran, hasn't really shown up. He's been definitely the weakest member of the roster so far this year. But maybe surprisingly here, my dud of the series is going to go to Zeus. And that might shock a few people. I just thought he really wasn't that good this series. He was playing a bunch of Engage here. He played the Alistair, he played the Leona. Just not necessarily always on point with the engages. I just want to see more out of him, and I don't think anybody on T1 necessarily played bad, and I wanted to kind of highlight that here. Speaking of T1, Closer is back in the mid lane. He had a pretty good series here. It's tough to really blame him. Yone was definitely his worst game. That Syndra game in Game 1 was incredibly strong. I think he has a really good partnership with Elim. I think he works better with Elim than Faker does. Faker's maybe a little bit better, but I think Elim and Closer as a duo is probably a little stronger than Elim and Faker. Speaking of Elim, he was fantastic in Game 1 on that Jarvan. Jarvan's actually becoming a really solid pick. I'd be shocked if we don't see more of him coming. I know his numbers are a little bit low, but like he's someone that I really understand why he's doing well. and I'd be shocked to not see more of him in the future. We really saw the drawbacks of Udyr in Game 2, where he was just not allowed to do anything. With so much CC, the Renekton, the Lilia, the Yone, there's really not much that Udyr can do to get in on any of them, so it was really, really easy to see kind of the drawbacks of Udyr in that game, kind of what I was talking about. If you're going to look for a down spot on this T1 roster in this series, it's definitely going to be the bot lane. Gumayusi and Keria definitely were just not good. Or they were fine, but they were not as good, I should say, as KT Rolster's bot lane of Hybrid and Zeus here. Hybrid really outclassed Gumayusi, who has been kind of a bright spot here. I think the Vayne into Samira is an incredibly tough matchup, so I'm not going to blame him too much for that. However, you definitely don't want to see him go back to that Vayne in Game 3. I'm not a huge fan of that draft decision. Especially, I'm okay with it with the Galio, but I'd rather see something like the Braum to keep her alive a lot easier. So, not exactly what I wanted to see, but not the worst thing in the world either. This is a massive win for KT. This is a team that has kind of sneakily been, staying in it for a while here. And let's keep in mind, however, that this team is still below 500 in terms of actual games. They're 2-2, but they are 5-6 in terms of actual games. So, I've seen a lot of hype online talking about them as like some elite contender team. I don't think they are quite nearly there, but I do think it's very, very good to see them be able to take take 2 games off of T1 here. As for T1, their macro is a big problem. It's not quite as bad as Afreeca, but it's definitely something that they're going to have to fix. They have thrown so many series and so many leads so far this year. It's very, very concerning. I'm not going to harp on it too much because I do think this is a team that is going to eventually figure it out. I have faith in this roster to kind of get it together. However, it is important to note that while I do have faith for them to get it together in the future, it is most certainly not there right now. That's going to bring us to our final series of Week 2 here in the LCK, and that is Gen G taking on Hanwha Life Esports here in what was a very, very fun series to watch. I feel like I've said that 8 million times so far, but it's been true every single time. So this is a 2-1 series win for Hanwha, a massive win, Gen G's first loss on the year so far. A massive, massive, massive win here for Hanwha with some players really, really showing out. Gen G does take Game 1 after a really, really good team fight at around 20 minutes. Hanwha dominates in Game 2, and then in Game 3, they kind of snowball out of control after a team fight, kind of in the mid-game. Very solid series here from Hanwha. You're really starting to get a lot out of, maybe some of the players you weren't as excited about. But let's be honest here. Chovy is going to be my player of the series. He's also going to be my player of the week. He's probably the MVP of the season so far. He has been phenomenal so far this year. This Hanwha team, I think, is overperforming my expectations at least, just because, obviously, Chovy and Deft, you can go and check my preseason predictions. A lot of people got on my case for having Chovy as the #1 mid laner in the LCK over Showmaker, but Chovy is just unbelievable. Like, this guy just carries his team, and he is absolutely doing that right now. Deft is playing well. I think the big catalyst for this team, however, of course, Chovy and Deft can play well, and they're going to be the main focus of this team. However, you need your team to back you up. I think the big catalyst, like I said earlier, has been Arthur, who I think has been very surprisingly good so far this year. He was very good in this series against Gen G, outclassing Clid for most of the series. I think the bot lane didn't play nearly as good as they could have. However, this is one of the best bot lanes in the LCK here in Ruler and Life, so not too much to take away. I love seeing Life draw Jarvan bans. I think that's just so funny to me, but it is something. As for the top lane matchup, like I said, Rascal is in that conversation for MVP. I thought he did his best here. He was very good in Game 1. He was probably my player of the game in Game 1 on that Akali. The Akali pick is just so oppressive. We saw that out of Chovy in Game 2 as well, or in Game 3 rather, as well, but I like what Rascal's doing. One guy who I didn't like so much in the series is BDD. He's going to be my dud of the series here. Just didn't like what I saw out of him. 3 games of Syndra and 3 games where he didn't really show up. Not exactly what you want to see when you're kind of getting your pick. BDD clearly likes the Syndra pick, and that's clearly what he wanted to go to. And it just did not work, really, in any of the games. So I'm going to take a few points off there for, he got his picks, but he still couldn't do much on them. I know he was going into Chovy, who is absolutely incredible, but still want to see more out of him. Hanwha is an actual contender. I think that's what we learned from this series, is Hanwha is an actual contender for an LCK championship here. Gen G is a very good team, and this is, not Gen G playing poorly. This is Hanwha playing a lot better, and I think that's going to be really, really scary this is a team I think that can win any game just from the basis of how good their star players are in Chovy and Deft. So it'll be interesting to see exactly where they go from here, but a very, very comforting and optimistic win here from Hanwha. That's going to go ahead and do it for my Week 2 LCK review, recap, analysis, whatever you want to call it. On the screen now, on the left, you are seeing the current LCK standings after Week 2. On the right, you're seeing my personal power rankings. We're going to go ahead and go over the largest risers and fallers in my power rankings. The largest riser, to no one's surprise, should be KT Rolster, going up 3 spots from 8 to 5 this week. A big win over T1. Something that I personally didn't expect. They showed up really, really well in that series against Hanwha as well. So, a really solid week for KT and definitely something to look at going forward. My biggest faller this week, to no one's surprise, should be T1. And they're going to drop down 4. They were my second place team after they lost to Damwon. I really thought that those two teams were pretty close, especially after the series we saw last week. But T1 just does not seem to have it together right now. I do not expect this team to stick down in 6th for very long. I think this is probably a little too pessimistic. If I was being real, I probably would put them at 4. I think they're probably worse than that top tier right now of Damwon, Hanwha, and Gen.G. But if they went up against someone like DRX, do I think they could beat them? Probably. It'll be interesting to see, though, what happens with that going forward. As for other interesting moves, Damwon and Brion staying put. Obviously, Brion beating Damwon in a 2-0, a pretty convincing 2-0. Like I said, I'm just going to treat it like it's an outlier and not take too much stock in it. I think Damwon's the best team in the LCK. I think Brion's the worst team in the LCK. I'm not going to think about that too much. And then DRX and Hanwha jumping up. Hanwha, obviously, with the massive win over Gen.G, going to leapfrog them to 2nd place. This is an actual contender team that I think could win any day. And then DRX with another really solid 2-0 week. I know it wasn't against the best teams in Nongshim and SANDBOX, but, not the worst teams either. Both competitive teams. And for DRX to kind of consistently be coming back and being able to play this macro-wise, I think is really impressive to see, and I definitely like the direction they're going in. But that's going to be it. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and leave a like, leave a comment about anything, if you want to chat about any of these series or your opinions on the LCK in general. I love chatting with you guys down in the comment section. You know that. So I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. I hope you continue to have a wonderful day, and I will see you all later.